Think Florida real estate is still on fire heading into 2026? That story is starting to crack. On the surface, everything still looks perfect. Palm trees, beachfront condos, shiny new buildings going up everywhere. But underneath that postcard image, a very different reality is taking shape. Homes are sitting longer, inventory is stacking up, and the costs that buyers can't ignore anymore are quietly changing the game. This isn't about one sudden crash, it's about pressure building from every direction. Insurance premiums are exploding, HOA fees are climbing fast, special assessments are blindsiding condo owners, and property taxes keep pushing monthly payments higher than most people ever expected. In Florida, the sale price isn't the real number anymore. The real number is what you pay every single month: mortgage, insurance, flood coverage, taxes, and if it's a condo, association fees that can jump overnight. A few years ago, buyers ignored those costs because prices only went one way: up. Now, buyers are hesitating, sellers are cutting prices, and in certain cities, the math just doesn't work anymore. So today, we're breaking down 10 Florida cities where the housing market is showing serious cracks heading into 2026. These are places where momentum is fading, affordability is breaking down, and confidence is starting to slip. If you live in Florida or you're thinking about buying here, this isn't fear, this is information. Consider this your real estate briefing. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. Which Florida city do you think is under the most pressure right now? Alright, let's hit the road. Number 10. Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale looks like the kind of market that should never slow down. Water everywhere, boats in every direction, luxury towers, sunshine, and a steady stream of people who want to live where everyone else vacations. But heading into 2026, Fort Lauderdale is under a very specific kind of pressure. It's not just about prices anymore, it's about costs. Even when sellers cut the price, the monthly payment can still feel brutal because insurance bills don't negotiate and condo fees don't care what a seller hopes to get. Here's what's showing up on the ground. More listings are sitting longer. Price drops aren't shocking anymore, they're expected. And that change in mindset matters. When buyers think prices might be better next month, they stop rushing. They wait, they watch, they negotiate harder. Now add the coastal reality. Insurance has become a major stress point across Florida, but coastal cities feel it first and hardest. In Fort Lauderdale, buyers aren't just asking how close the unit is to the water. They're asking about premiums. They're asking about renewals. They're asking what the building has dealt with in the last year. And when it comes to condos, the fear isn't just interest rates anymore. It's the surprise assessment, the reserve funding changes, the inspection-driven repairs, the unexpected bill that shows up and turns a dream condo into a financial headache overnight. So Fort Lauderdale isn't crashing, it's being repriced around reality. And when a market goes through that kind of reset, sellers who wait too long to adjust often get stuck. If you live here, look around. Are you seeing more price cuts? More units listed at the same time in the same buildings? That clustering is usually one of the first signs that confidence is starting to crack. Now we head across the state to a city that became famous for one thing: waterfront living on a massive scale. Number 9. Cape Coral. Cape Coral sold a Florida dream that buyers couldn't resist. Canals in the backyard, boats at the dock, water views without the Miami price tag. It felt like you weren't just buying a house, you were buying a lifestyle. But heading into 2026, Cape Coral is turning into a warning sign. Not because it isn't desirable, but because it grew too fast and too hot, right before ownership costs jumped all at once. The first problem is supply. Cape Coral built aggressively during the boom, and when new homes pile up faster than buyers can absorb them, markets don't collapse overnight. They slow, they soften, and then sellers start undercutting each other just to get attention. The second problem is insurance. In flood-exposed areas, insurance is no longer a line item, it's a second mortgage. Even buyers farther inland are asking the same uncomfortable question: if premiums jump again next year, can I still afford to stay? That question alone kills momentum, because fear changes demand faster than prices ever will. The third pressure point is investors heading for the exit. Cape Coral pulled in investors chasing relocation trends in short-term rental income. But as taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs rise, those margins disappear fast. And when the math stops working, investors don't wait around. They list, they cut, they move on. That's how neighborhoods can feel stable one month, then suddenly feel crowded with listings the next. And once buyers realize they have options, urgency vanishes. Cape Coral is still a beautiful place, but going into 2026, beauty alone isn't enough. If the monthly numbers don't work, the market doesn't either. Now we head inland, to a city many people once believed was the safer Florida bet, simply because it wasn't on the coast.
Number 8. Ocala. For a long time, Ocala was sold as Florida without the chaos. Horse country, wide open space, a slower pace of life, and prices that actually felt achievable. But heading into 2026, Ocala is dealing with a problem a lot of once affordable markets run into. It got discovered. Then it got built up. Then it got expensive. Now it's trying to cool down without tipping into a full slide. You can see it in the data and on the streets. Inventory is climbing. Homes are sitting longer. And that sends a clear signal. Buyers aren't rushing anymore. They're comparing. They're waiting. They're holding out for better terms. Ocala also runs into a local affordability ceiling. When home prices surge faster than local wages, the market eventually hits resistance, and that resistance shows up quietly at first. Longer listing times, more negotiations, more price cuts that never would have happened a few years ago. And even though Ocala isn't a hurricane headline city, it's still inside Florida's insurance reality. Statewide insurance hikes don't stop at the coastline. Higher premiums still land on homeowners here, and buyers are factoring that in. Ocala is the kind of market where corrections don't feel dramatic at first. A few reductions here, a few extra listings there, a few sellers saying they'll just wait it out. But waiting works until it doesn't. Because when enough sellers wait, inventory piles up. And when inventory piles up, buyers gain leverage. Ocala isn't crashing, but it is shifting into a buyer decision market. And that's a huge change from the frenzy of the last few years. Now we move to one of the biggest Florida spotlights of the entire last cycle.
Number 7. Tampa. Tampa was one of the biggest relocation magnets in Florida. It checked every box: jobs, lifestyle, water, pro sports, and a housing market that felt unstoppable. For a while, it seemed like prices could only go one way, but heading into 2026, Tampa is showing what happens when a market built on momentum runs into higher monthly payments and rising supply at the same time. Inventory has been climbing. Homes are taking longer to go under contract, and that alone changes how people behave. During the frenzy years, buyers rushed because they were afraid of missing out. Now they're doing the opposite. They're shopping, they're comparing, they're asking for concessions. And here's what makes Tampa especially complicated. Tampa isn't one single market. Some neighborhoods still feel competitive, especially well-priced homes in strong school zones. But other pockets are slowing quickly, particularly areas flooded with new construction and sellers still clinging to peak pricing. Then there's the rental side. A lot of investors bought in Tampa expecting easy demand and steady rent growth, but as supply increases and renters push back on prices, cash flow gets tight. And when the numbers stop working, investors don't hold on emotionally. They list. That adds even more competition, not just for other investors, but for everyday homeowners trying to sell. Tampa also carries a quieter pressure most listings don't show: insurance risk perception. Florida's insurance market has reshaped buyer thinking statewide. Even homes far from the shoreline aren't immune to long-term premium concerns. So Tampa is now going through a reset. A reset in speed, a reset in price expectations, and in some neighborhoods, a reset in what buyers consider a reasonable monthly total. If you live here, the most important signal isn't just price, it's time. When homes sit longer, sellers start cutting to stay competitive. And once price cuts become normal, the entire mood of the market shifts. Now, we head north, to Florida's largest city by land area, and one of the most important affordability battlegrounds in the state.
Number 6. Jacksonville. Jacksonville doesn't always grab the same headlines as Miami or Tampa, but it's been one of the quiet giants of Florida's growth era. People moved here for space, for relative affordability, for the idea of a stable, livable Florida city. But heading into 2026, Jacksonville is running into the same math problems showing up across the state. Higher interest rates changed what buyers can qualify for. Rising ownership costs changed what buyers are willing to accept. And when the buyer pool shrinks, inventory doesn't need to explode to create pressure. It just needs to rise enough that buyers feel like they have options. Because once buyers feel options, urgency disappears. Jacksonville is also a city of contrasts. Some neighborhoods still move quickly, especially homes that are priced realistically and well-maintained. But in areas where sellers are stuck on peak-era pricing, listings can linger. And when a home sits, it invites negotiation, price cuts, concessions that wouldn't have been considered just a few years ago. There's another layer here. Affordability wasn't just a bonus in Jacksonville, it was part of the city's identity. As that affordability fades, demand shifts outward. Buyers look farther from the core. They downsize, or they wait. That's how pressure spreads quietly, without one dramatic headline. Jacksonville also feels shifts in investor behavior. When investors start pulling back, listings can rise quickly in specific pockets, creating softness at the neighborhood level, even when the metro still looks stable overall. And once again, the insurance theme shows up. Florida's insurance costs are shaping buyer decisions statewide, even in cities that aren't known as beach markets. Jacksonville isn't a sudden crash story, it's a slow wait story. More negotiation, more concessions, and more sellers realizing that peak prices are no longer the default. Now we move back down the Gulf side to a market that became a symbol of Florida luxury living.
Number 5. Sarasota. Sarasota sells a lifestyle. Bright sand, marinas and sunsets, art, culture, retirees, and second homes. It's the kind of place that feels like demand should always be there. But luxury markets behave differently, and they're usually the first to slow. Heading into 2026, Sarasota is facing a very different buyer than it did in 2022 or 2023. High-end buyers have options. They're not rushed, they're not emotional, and they don't need to act fast. They can wait, they can negotiate, and they will walk away if the numbers don't make sense. Now add the real costs of owning here: insurance, maintenance, HOA fees, and for many buyers, the reality of carrying a second home year after year. What once felt like a dream purchase starts to feel like a responsibility. This is where things turn psychological. Luxury buyers don't panic, they pause. And when they pause, listings start to pile up. Once listings stack up, sellers stop competing with buyers and start competing with each other. Sarasota also has a heavy condo presence. On paper, condos look like the easiest Florida dream, but rising fees and surprise assessments can push the monthly payment far higher than buyers expect. That alone makes people cautious, even when they love the location. And Sarasota depends heavily on out-of-state wealth and retirement timing. When financial markets feel uncertain, those buyers pause. When they pause, inventory builds. And once inventory builds in a luxury market, price cuts spread fast. No seller wants to be the stale listing that sits while someone else sells. Sarasota isn't losing its beauty, but beauty doesn't stop a correction when buyer psychology shifts. Now, we head to a city that exploded as Florida's value play and then got priced like a trophy market.
Number 4. Port St. Lucie. Port St. Lucie was once sold as the smart Florida compromise, more affordable than the flashier coastal cities, close enough to beaches and amenities, packed with newer communities that felt clean, simple, and easy. But heading into 2026, Port St. Lucie is showing the classic signs of a market that moved faster than its fundamentals. Prices rose quicker than local incomes could comfortably support, new construction kept adding supply, and now buyers are more payment sensitive than ever. In a payment-sensitive market, the monthly number matters more than the list price. Small changes in interest rates, taxes, or insurance can wipe out demand overnight because buyers here aren't shopping based on total wealth. They're shopping based on whether the payment feels survivable. And in Port St. Lucie, survivable is the key word. A seller can cut the price, but if insurance and property taxes keep the payment high, buyers still hesitate. When listings sit longer, sellers start reducing prices. When reductions become common, buyers learn patience. And once buyers learn patience, the market stops being a race. Port St. Lucie is also vulnerable to perception shifts. If buyers start seeing it as a place where prices are coming down, that belief feeds itself. More buyers wait, inventory builds, sellers cut again. There's another pressure too. Rapid growth brings infrastructure into the conversation. Buyers start asking about schools, traffic, everyday convenience. If the city feels stretched, demand softens at the exact moment supply is rising. And with Florida's ownership costs still elevated statewide, there's no safety net of cheap carrying costs to pull buyers back in quickly. Now we head back to the Gulf side, to a city shaped by storms, rebuilding, and the full weight of Florida's insurance reality.
Number 3. Fort Myers. Fort Myers was one of the fastest-moving markets in Florida during the boom. Prices jumped quickly, investors flooded in, and relocation demand made it feel unstoppable. But heading into 2026, Fort Myers is dealing with the long shadow of storm risk and rising ownership costs. Here, insurance isn't a background detail. It's a defining feature of the market. When insurance premiums rise, it reshapes everything: who can buy, how much they can afford, and how long they're willing to hold a property if the math stops working. There's another layer too: repairs and resilience. After major storms, the cost isn't just higher premiums, it's roofs, windows, flood mitigation, and the upgrades buyers now expect before they feel comfortable. Those costs slow deals and turn into major negotiation points. Now add the investor factor. When short-term rental income softens, confidence breaks fast, and when confidence breaks, listings rise. On the surface, the market can still look busy, but underneath, negotiations get tougher. Price cuts become more common, and sellers who bought near the peak learn that exiting isn't as easy as entering was. Another pressure buyers feel immediately is condo and HOA costs. Fees are rising across many communities, and buyers aren't focused on just the mortgage anymore. They're focused on the full monthly total. Buyer behavior has clearly changed. They ask about wind mitigation credits, roof age, flood history, and whether storm repairs were done the right way. Every question becomes leverage, and once enough sellers decide to list at the same time, the shift happens fast. It turns into a race to be the first realistic listing, because the last one ends up chasing the cuts. Now we move to a city with a strong identity, a vibrant culture, and a housing market that ran especially hot during the frenzy years.
Number 2. St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg became a true favorite. Art districts, walkable neighborhoods, waterfront parks, and a lifestyle that pulled in both locals and newcomers. For a while, it felt untouchable. But heading into 2026, St. Petersburg is running into the same Florida reality hitting even the most desirable cities. Rising ownership costs change behavior. As inventory builds and homes sit longer, sellers stop setting the tone. They start competing. And in a market that saw fast appreciation, competition usually means price cuts. What makes St. Petersburg different right now is how buyers are negotiating. They're not just talking price, they're negotiating risk, credits, repairs, inspection findings, and clarity around anything that could turn into a surprise later.
The condo and coastal conversation is front and center here too. Buyers are asking tougher questions about HOA fees, reserve funds, and whether a building is approaching a major repair cycle. The buyer pool has also changed. During the boom, out-of-state buyers moved quickly. In 2026, they move carefully. They tour more homes. They track reductions. They wait for sellers to blink first. St. Petersburg now feels like a split market. Updated homes in prime locations can still move, but anything dated, overpriced, or uncertain tends to sit. And when homes sit, the perception of weakness spreads fast. The total monthly number matters more than ever. Insurance, property taxes, HOA fees, utilities. When those costs rise, buyers push for lower prices to compensate. That caution slows demand, and slower demand creates leverage for buyers. St. Petersburg isn't losing its appeal. It's being repriced around reality, and that's what a correction really is, a reset of expectations. Now we arrive at number 1, the city that looks like it should be stable, but is showing the most dangerous mix of supply, affordability pressure, and fading momentum.
Number 1, Lakeland. Lakeland sits right between Tampa and Orlando, which once made it feel like the perfect growth corridor, close to major metros, more affordable than coastal hotspots, and filled with neighborhoods that expanded fast as Florida demand exploded. But heading into 2026, Lakeland is showing what happens when a mid-sized market absorbs big city pricing and then runs straight into the wall of buyer affordability. Here's how it plays out. Inventory rises, days on market stretch longer, the market slows. When the market slows, sellers cut. When sellers cut, buyers wait even longer. And that feedback loop is especially dangerous in Lakeland. Why? Because many buyers here were already stretching to make the numbers work. When a buyer stretches, there's no room for surprises. Higher insurance, higher property taxes, unexpected repairs. Those costs don't just hurt, they break the budget. Lakeland also pulled in investor activity during the boom because it looked like a value play. But value plays only work when the monthly math works, and when insurance, taxes, and maintenance costs rise, that edge disappears fast. That's why Lakeland is so exposed. It's not one dramatic failure, it's multiple pressures hitting at the same time. Affordability limits, rising holding costs, and a shift from urgency to patience. And patience is toxic for a market that depended on momentum. Because momentum only survives when buyers believe next month will cost more than this one. When that belief flips, the market has no choice but to adjust. Now take a step back. This road trip shows one important truth. Florida is not one market. It's many markets reacting to the same statewide pressures: higher total ownership costs, insurance stress, condo fees and reserve realities, and buyers who are no longer willing to gamble on endless appreciation. That doesn't mean every Florida city is collapsing, but it does mean the era of easy wins is over in many places. And in fragile markets, conditions can change quickly. If this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening in Florida heading into 2026, tap like, share this with someone watching the market, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next deep dive. And tell us in the comments, which Florida city should we cover next, and is your neighborhood starting to feel the pressure? Because we're not here for the fantasy, we're here for the truth after the hype.